We are back on Taking Care of Business on Koerner Radio, News Talk 1180, 1230 KGEO, and 1410 KERI. Our guest by phone is Erik Rush, author of Negrophilia, From Slave Block to Pedestal, and also the man who broke the Reverend Wright story. So before we were going to go on the break, I was going to ask you a question about Obama's worldview. He spent 20 years in a church with Reverend Wright. To me, you look at that and that influence, and to me, that's why he handled the Benghazi affair the way he did. Do you agree with that? Any comment on that?
I absolutely do agree with that, and it sort of is a reflection of how he's handled a lot of things in terms of our weak, or rather his weak foreign policy and his facilitation and support of this, a lot of Islamist groups, the way that he's handled things in Libya in general, in Egypt. I believe that, leftists in general, and Obama in particular, have a very dim view of the military and how they have been used historically. And I think that his worldview, his actions reflect his worldview. He doesn't really think that the military are good for anything except to just advance the aims of his administration. Of course, it's okay to use them like that when it's a left-leaning administration. But in terms of Benghazi, there are a lot of reports coming out now about something like Fast and Furious, similar to that going on, arming insurgents. Who are the weapons going to? They don't know. There's a lot of questions and a lot of rumor and unsubstantiation. But it all falls into the whole idea that he has to support these poor people who've been abused by us horrible anti-colonialists, and when the military gets into trouble, well, they're not really, if he has something better to do than to help them out, he will go and do that.
Yeah, he's an interesting character. I was listening to some news articles today, and it was interesting that he said that we want to make sure that because of the floods, we go in, we take care of our people, we don't leave anyone behind, and we're there for them. And then you think back to Benghazi, and it's just the opposite.
Oh, yeah, and there have, people have already, written blogs and articles and tweets and all of that. I mean, that's going to wind up being an unfortunate thing for him to say, because immediately people harken back to Benghazi, and what do you mean you don't leave anybody behind? You just did that in a big way.
Yeah, you wonder who's responsible for that. He doesn't seem to want to step up and talk about it at all, and he's letting everybody else take the blame. He reminds me of a song that Brenda Lee had years and years ago called "I'm Sorry, So Sorry."
Yeah, yeah, and nobody seems to be able to, the blame for this or the responsibility, it's like this hot potato, and you can see it, flying back and forth between the intelligence community, Obama, Hillary Clinton, and nobody wants to hold on to it. They're just hoping that the election will come and go before they have to answer any questions, if ever.
Erik, as Clay was singing a couple of stanzas there, the lights were starting to blink in here. I'm glad he didn't sing another stanza. I think the equipment would have gone out.
He was putting the lights out there. Okay.
Yeah.
I was hoping that wasn't on my end.
Well, that goes along with his apology tour. Also, he went around the world saying he's sorry. You know who's sorry? The American people are sorry. That's who's sorry right now.
Well, once again, his worldview necessitates his making Americans suffer to pay for the prosperity that they have had on the backs of the, little brown peoples of the world. That's his worldview. We have prospered and we have enjoyed things, and it's only been because our horrible corporations and military have gone out there and beaten up on the rest of the world. So, people really need to wrap their brains around that if they're going to understand why we're in the position we're in, and why Obama really doesn't have, setting it straight and fixing it is not at the top of his priority list.
You know, what is at the top of his priority list other than getting elected, which isn't going to happen?
Well, of course, getting elected, then, of course, once again, as he transmitted to Vladimir, he'll have a lot more flexibility, and he will be able to go, full force with his socialistic agenda. One of the things that surprised me about Obama was that within a few weeks of being inaugurated, he was a lot more aggressive than I actually expected him to be, although I did expect him to do the things that he did. He did them far more quickly, or got right into it with both hands more quickly than I thought he would. And given a successful re-election bid, I shudder to think what things are going to look like in a couple of years.
Amen. Our guest by phone, Erik Rush, author of Negrophilia, From Slave Block to Pedestal. Erik, excuse me, I've got a question for you on, and this is a reoccurring theme that I've had. Excuse me. The Republican Party, I think, in the African-American community has really blown it. Do you agree with that? And what can we do, or what should the Republicans do to change that? Because when you look at the value system, most minorities, Hispanics, blacks, their moral compass tends to be Republican, but yet they vote Democratic.
Yeah, that is true, and I think they have blown it, and the reason for that, I believe, is that their perception has been that they can't compete with the goodies, the things that the Democrats will dole out in order to ensure the allegiance of minority communities, blacks, Latinos, what have you, and that isn't true. I think that they should have been and should therefore start making efforts to go into these communities. Perhaps it'll have to be black conservatives that do it initially, but go into these communities and talk about the kinds of things that have been done and offer things that will really help them to get ahead. Business opportunities and loans and things like that are fine, but if you have the same kinds of things tied to them that you have entitlements tied to, then they're really not any better than entitlements. And cultivating a positive economic environment obviously is a given. That has to be done, but doing something about the education system, which has obviously been controlled by the left for a long, long time, that would also go a long way to changing the perception and the lot of black Americans in general, because they wouldn't have the substandard education by design that sets people up for failure in later life.
Now, where is the Asian community in regard to what we just talked about? Because they seem to do very well with education and with business.
Well, the thing about the Asian community is that, a lot of them, being first generation, behave like a lot of first generation immigrants from any country that you want to name throughout the history of America. They get here, they're hungry, they're willing to work hard, and so they succeed. The second generation tends to do similarly. The problem that you have in the black and Latino communities, for example, is that, number one, they've been here, or at least have had access to the United States for a long time, and have been materially spoiled because, Americans in general don't really know what poverty is to start with. And then they've been propagandized by the left in that they are entitled, they've been abused. If they're not driving a Lexus, then somebody's trying to keep them down. Well, the Asians don't have to deal, they're not targeted with that propaganda, and if they're just arriving from, another country within a generation or so, they really haven't been exposed to it.
Definitely. Erik, again, we're running out of time. Next time we have to have you on for the full hour. We'd love to have you back. The website is ericrush.com. His current book is Negrophilia, From Slave Block to Pedestal, America's Racial Obsession. And, I was going to ask you a question. I'll have to save it till next time. On your last book, which is Annexing Mexico, Solving the Border Problem Through Annexation and Assimilation. I have a bunch of questions for you on that book.
Oh, that'll be fun.
Since I'm Canadian, Erik, I got a whole lot of opinions on that subject.
All righty then. Well, we'll have something to talk about.
Yeah. Okay. In about 10 seconds, do you think Romney will win the election?
I think he will win the election. I think people are going to be surprised, not that Obama got beaten, but how badly he got beaten.
I think you're right.
Amen.
Erik, thank you very much for the time, and we'll see you again soon.
All right. Thank you very much. Have a good one.
You too. We'll be back in a moment on Taking Care of Business on Koerner Radio, News Talk 1180.